Welcome to Lesson 11 of the Introduction to Python course. In this lesson, we will be discussing PEP8 and Pylint. So what is PEP8? Now, in writing Python code, most developers have unique ideas of how the code should be written. Sometimes, though, this can make the code look quite untidy and incomprehensible to fresh eyes that come across the program. In order to make sure that there's some kind of uniformity and neatness while writing our code, so that anyone who comes across the code from any part of the world and at any point of time has no trouble in understanding it, we follow something called a style guide. PEP8 is the official style guide for Python coding. It provides a list of suggestions and recommendations that developers can follow to make their code as tidy and as comprehensible as possible. To make this process easier, we use something called Pylint. Now, Pylint is a software that helps us to follow the PEP8 guidelines and to find potential issues within our code. It helps us to save a lot of time while writing our code. For now, let's just get a little deeper into PEP8. The full PEP8 documentation is available at the link given over here. In this lesson, though, we will just run through a couple of the most important recommendations that we need to keep in mind while we program. Now, the first thing we need to know is the maximum line length. So this limits our lines to 79 characters whenever possible. For flowing lines, like long text strings, we limit the lines to 72 characters. Next, we have indentation. So for every level of indentation, we use 4 spaces, not tabs. Then we have continuation lines. What we need to remember is that when we need to wrap a line of code across lines to ensure that we are following the maximum line length, we should do either of the following. 1. Align the wrapped elements vertically. Let's take a look at an example. Let's say we have a variable called moonwalk, and we use datetime bracket year equal to 1969, month equal to 7, day equal to 21, hour equal to 2, minute equal to 56, second equal to 15, tz info equal to date time dot time zone dot utc. So this is one way to align elements by aligning them vertically. Now, another method of doing this is using a hanging indent. So let's take the same example, and we will say moonwalk equal to datetime dot datetime. This time, right after the bracket, we go to the next line, and we add 1 indentation here. Then we continue with the rest of the information. So we have year 1969, month 7, day 21. Next line, indentation, hour equal to 2, minute equal to 56, second equal to 15. Next line, indentation, tz or time zone info equal to datetime dot time zone dot utc. Now, in implementing a hanging indent, we need to make sure that there are no arguments on the first line, as we will see in the next example. So this is just an example of how not to use a hanging indent. So once again, let's have our variable moonwalk. We say datetime dot datetime. And then over here on the same line, we say year equal to 1969, month equal to 7, day equal to 21. And then we shift to the next line and we add just a single indent here. Hour equal to 2, minute equal to 56, second equal to 15. Once again, giving only a single indent. Time zone info equal to date time dot time zone dot UTC. So this is an example of how to not use hanging indents. If you're using a hanging indent, it has to be in this format. Now a third method is that the third thing that we need to remember is that long sequences need to be wrapped. Now the third thing that we need to remember is that long sequences that need to be wrapped must be structured in such a way that the closing bracket is aligned with the first line. So let's have a look at an example. Let's say we have fruit equal to square bracket. Then we go to the next line and then we say apple, orange, banana, pear, lemon, watermelon, and strawberry. Another way to do this is with the closing bracket aligned with the last line. Something like this. So once again, we have fruit. Then we have apple, orange, banana, pear, lemon, watermelon, strawberry. And this, in this case, is aligned with the last line over here, rather than aligning it with the first line. So next we will talk about blank lines. Now we can use two blank lines to separate out function definitions. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say we have some function, do this, then we have a blank line there. As you can see here, we are leaving two blank lines, one here, one there. Now we go to our second function. We will say define and then do that. Now we'll give a third function. We'll say do this too. After this, we can just have more code. So this is how we can separate different functions with the help of two blank lines. Now, blank lines can also be used to separate out logical sections within functions. So let's take a look at an example here. So let's say we have a function do this, and we can add our first line of code here. We can add our second line of code here. And now let's say we need to leave a gap, so we can leave a blank line, and then we can continue with add the third line of code here, and so on. And then of course we can have more code for the rest of the program. So this is how we can use blank lines. Now we have something called UTF-8 encoding. UTF-8 is an encoding system for Unicode. So while we don't really need to get into all the technical details of this, all that we need to keep in mind is that Python files need to be encoded using UTF-8. Next, we will move on to imports. So there are a few pointers that we need to keep in mind while importing into a Python program. First, all imports should be located at the beginning of the program. Second, standard library imports need to be placed before third-party ones. Third, third-party imports need to be placed before local ones. And fourth, we should import a full package before importing parts of a package. So let's see this in an example. So let's say we have something like import math first. Then we will say from datetime import date, comma, time. So first we import the full package, which is math, and then we import parts of packages. So from datetime we are importing date, and we are importing time. Now what we shouldn't do is something like this. From datetime import date, comma, time, and then import math. This is not the correct way of importing into Python. Now the fifth thing to keep in mind is that imports need to use separate lines rather than just congesting them all into the same line. So for example, we can say import math, and then we can say import random. Now what we shouldn't do is this: import math, comma, random. All right, so that's it for importing. Next, we have quotes. The following points are recommended when we are using single versus double quotes. First, we can use double quotes when the given string already contains a single quote character, like an apostrophe. On the other hand, we can use single quotes when the given string contains a double quote character. And for triple quoted strings, we can use double quote characters. Now, the fourth point is just to be consistent with yourself. This is also kind of important because you can't keep using single quotes somewhere and then suddenly shift to double quotes and then go back to single quotes. It just looks very messy and very inconsistent. So make sure that you remain consistent and follow the quotations and everything as is necessary for your program. Then we have white spaces. So we will see how to use white spaces and how not to use white spaces in expressions and statements. So we'll start with when not to add white spaces. So first is inside parentheses, brackets, or curly braces. For example, if we say if A equal to B, this is okay. Now, if we say, okay, let me just add a distinction here. So let's call this good. Now let's call this bad. And this is what we shouldn't do. Parentheses, space, A equal to B, space. So this is incorrect. Now let's call this good again, and let's have something like all A, B, C, and D. And we will call this bad, and this will be all bracket space and then A, B, C, and D. The second thing is before a comma. So let's say, so once again, we will call this good. And this is our example. So we have all, we have A, B, C, and D. So this is fine. This is absolutely correct. Now what we shouldn't do is this. All, square bracket, A space comma, space, B, space comma, space, C, space comma, space, and D. Now third, before an open parenthesis in a function call. So for example, the good way or the correct way to do this is print hello world. So this is fine. Now the incorrect way of doing this is like this. Print space parenthesis hello world. Now fourth, around the equal to sign in keyword arguments. So the correct way of doing this is like this. Def dupes list 1, list 2, sort equal to true. The incorrect way of doing this is def dupes list 1, list 2, sort equal to true. Now, we can surround assignment and comparison operators with white spaces, as we will see in the next few examples. So, this is good. Greeting equal to hello. This is not good. Greeting equal to, sorry, without the space, equal to hello. Let me just change this. All right. Now, once again, this is good. If we say A plus equal to 1, and we add white spaces. And this is not so good when we say A plus equal to 1 without the white spaces. Now, the third example would be, it is good if we do it this way. If A equal to 1, and it is not so good if we say if A equal to 1 without the white spaces in between A, the equal to signs, and the 1. So basically, we must not include any extra white space at the end of a line or on blank lines. Now, we have comments. So comments are proper sentences that are meant to be understood by anyone who views the code. They should use complete sentences and start with capital letters unless they start with a keyword that is generally written in lowercase. So just as an example, this is a comment. This is not a correct way of writing a comment. Pandas is a library is okay. So as you can see, these are just some examples of some ways that we can write comments. So this is starting with a capital letter. This is not starting with a capital letter, which according to what we've just read is not the correct way of writing this. And this does not start with a capital letter, but because this is a library name and libraries are usually called in lowercase, this comment is not considered incorrect. Now we have some additional content in PEP8. So basically, what we've covered so far is most of the important recommendations that are given within the PEP8 documentation. So as mentioned earlier, there are many more different recommendations that are given in the documentation. So it is advisable to go through this in order to have a good understanding of how to style your code. So with that, we can now move on to Pylint. So when writing our code, it's not always easy to find errors in the program or in the writing style. So to make this process easier for us as developers, we can use tools called linters that help us with reviewing our code and bringing to our notice any styling or programming errors. The most popular linter that is used in Python is called Pylint. So to install Pylint, we first need to open our terminal. So let's just get our terminal running. So now in our terminal, what we need to do is run the following command. So we say pip install Pylint. Now for me, it says requirement already satisfied since I already have this package on my system. But for you, you will get a bunch of information like this, and then it will say that the package has been installed if you have installed it correctly. So we can now use Pylint to analyze any given file. The syntax for using Pylint is something like this. So we would say Pylint, and then we would give our path to the file. This is just the basic syntax. Now, let's see how this would work if we wanted to use an actual file. So let's just enter our file destination. So let me quickly cd into it. So it would be, if I remember correctly, downloads, and then introduction to Python course content. Lesson 11. Right, so this is where my file is located. So, I have a file called encode underscore decode .py. So now what I need to do is, I should say Pylint space encode underscore decode .py. This would run Pylint on the file. So as you can see, we get a result like this. Now to save these results in a text file, we use a syntax that would look like this. So we would say Pylint path to file, and then we would say pylint.text. Basically, we would just give the file a name. So in this case, we have encode underscore decode. As you can see, it doesn't really output anything because it has just saved it to a text file. Now, if we want to view the text file, we can just call it out. So we can say pylint.txt. This would show us our text file. So this is the Pylint text file, and this is the information that it gave us even in the terminal. And it has given us a rating as well. So basically, for each line that Pylint feels it has some issue, it provides the name of the script, the line number, the character number, the Pylint message code and the message, as well as the abbreviated message. So we can see this in the following image. So we have the script name here. So this is just an example. Then there would be a line number, a character number, the Pylint message code, the missing function here, which or whatever the message is, and the abbreviated message. And finally, the report ends with a rating that is based on a scale of 10. So in this case, for my file, which is encode_decode, it has been rated a 4.50 out of 10. Now, it's widely understood that Pylint's suggestions and opinions go much beyond the scope of PEP8, and some developers even tend to disagree with Pylint. But this is just a trivial point that really would not affect our usage of PEP8 or Pylint. Now, one thing to note is that according to PEP8, every module and function should be commented. While I generally agree with this, I've not really followed this much in these lessons because all the different readings and explanations that accompany the code explain how the modules and functions work. But in many cases, the extra documentation would distract from the specific functionality that is being introduced. That is why in these lessons I've not really used many comments, but in general it is always good to add comments when you are programming. So there we go. So in this lesson, we have learned about the PEP8 coding standards, and we have learned how to use Pylint to analyze our code.